This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions shared are mine and my guests alone and don't represent our employers, past, present, or future. Medicine is always evolving and practices may vary. Nothing here should be taken as medical advice. Always follow your own professional judgment and institutional guidelines.
One of the big things is eating out. That's like the majority of the time. And so they're like, oh, I probably spend like 100 or two a month. Like, okay, cool. So what we do is we take the last 3 months, and if we're really aggressive, I like to sit down with them and take the last 6 months of bank statements, and we take a highlighter because I'm old school, and we take a highlighter if they're in person, and we go through and we highlight all of the door dashes, and we
Wow.
every single one, and we get an average. Usually between $500 and $600 is the norm per month.
Per month?
Per month, right?
Oh my gosh.
Which just sounds obscene, but you'd be surprised when you start totaling everything up. The Starbucks, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever other eating out they do, yeah, it adds up really fast.
Welcome to the Beyond the Call Light podcast with Gary, the ER nurse, where we tackle the tough topics in nursing. Update your whiteboards and huddle up because this episode begins now.
Welcome to Beyond the Call Light. I'm your host, Gary, the ER nurse, and joining me today is Ricky, the nurse financial guy who you can find on social media. I discovered him on TikTok, and he has some amazing advice that I wanted to get on here and share with y'all, and we're going to get right into it. Ricky, if you don't mind, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Obviously, my name is Ricky. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised there in a little town in Chicago called Oak Park, if you're familiar. Shortly after college, I moved down to Texas, spent some years in San Antonio, then over to Seattle, stayed there for a few years. Now we live in North Carolina. And along the way, I've had the great opportunity to get married, and I have 6 amazing children. They are so wonderful. Yeah, they're a handful. The oldest one is 11 and down to 2 years old. And so the house is always bustling. And I think that's a fair term. In terms of the field that I'm in, I was working for this. So back in the day, there was a company called Fry's Electronics. It was like a Best Buy on steroids, and I needed to leave. Uh, that company. And so one of my best friends said, "Hey, come on, join me over here in the financial space, the insurance space." And so I made the great leap. It's almost been 16 years now, 15 and a half years. And so it's been a learning opportunity for sure.
Now, what inspired you to focus your financial expertise on nurses?
Right. So I remember I mentioned I have the 6 kids. So we've spent an ungodly amount of time in the hospitals from, from their birth on. I mean, there aren't too many things that I haven't seen, but one of the things that has stuck out to me, this isn't a knock on doctors, but the individuals that stuck out the most over the years have been nurses by far. They're the ones who, in the middle of the night, when my kids were sick, they were coming in taking care of them. They were the ones that really helped. And so when I started talking to the nurses about their finances, without fail, 99% of them said that there wasn't anyone that was actively talking to them. And it seems like everyone chases after the doctors. And I was like, well, this doesn't really make much sense. You guys are, you're God's angels. So I shifted my focus and I started working with nurses a lot more and understanding the terminology, understanding the way that your shifts work, the 312s and and I picked up some weird things along the way, like understanding what a code brown is, where I did. I think, okay, wasn't expecting to learn that, but it's been fun. It's been quite a winding road, but it's been good. It's been very fulfilling, very rewarding.
Let's talk about, from your experiences, like working with these nurses, what are some of the most common financial mistakes or misconceptions that you have seen nurses make or come to you with?
I would say there's probably 2 or 3. The first one is a lot of times nurses don't have a budget in place. And so much like if you're going to be traveling somewhere, let's say you're going to go with your family on a cross country trip. We do a lot of those. But if you're going to do that, it's very difficult to know where you're going if you have no idea where you are right now. And I know that sounds simple just in ideology, but your finances work they're the same, right? You have to have an idea of like where you are right now in order to make the necessary changes. And I know everyone's probably heard about like the plane that takes off from Dallas to New York, and the changing of just one simple degree can throw them off kilter.
Hmm.
But a lot of nurses just have no idea about their budget. So they're taking care of their bills, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, like what's left over? Where are all those? I call it fat. So that extra money
Hmm.
that is just being spent on that additional Dooney and Burke purse, or buying a Ferrari, or whatever it is. Most of the nurses I'm talking to don't do that, but just spending those extra spends, that's where I find a lot of nurses struggle. So that's the first one, the budget. And the second one is understanding the way that things are taxed, understanding the way that their retirement accounts are taxed. I think a lot of nurses run across individuals that talk about, you need to open up a Roth. Well, why? You can throw money into a place, but if you don't understand the why behind it, it's not helping you. And there are different facets to that. But I would say those two things specifically, I'm constantly running across. And so there's a lot of education that takes place just in those two particular places.
And you said there was a third one?
Just those two for right now. I could keep
Oh,
going.
okay.
But those
Gotcha.
are the
Okay.
two big ones.
Now, I am one of these nurses that I'm very fortunate that I work somewhere that has a pension plan. I know that is not the norm, right? Most nurses that work in like for-profit hospitals, that is not an option. But those that work in federal government or state governments do have some type of pension option. But I think even then there are a lot of misconceptions about that. And what are your thoughts on that?
So one of the things that I've seen, and that's a really great question. One of the things that I've seen is that, number one, either nurses are relying so heavily on their pension that
Hmm.
they aren't even paying attention to contributing to their 403b or their 401k. And I want to say probably about 50% of the time, the companies they offer a pension and also a company match. Now the company match might not necessarily be 6%. It may only be 3%, but I'm constantly teaching people to use OPM, which is other people's money. So if you have an opportunity to get your company to match what you're putting in 100% of the time, you must do that. That should be a financial non-negotiable for
Yeah, that's
any.
free money.
It really is. It's the only place where you can have a guaranteed 100% rate of return. You must do that. That's like one of the first things that I look at. Do you know what your vesting schedule is? And do you know what your company matches? That's like one of the first questions. And without fail, no one knows that answer. So I end up reading the HR handbooks the majority of the time.
So like typically vesting in my experience is like either 3 or 5 years. Is that about right?
That's
Okay.
right. Yes, correct. Yeah. So it's usually like that for the 401ks, and then the pensions can look like 5 or 10 depending on the company. Right, right. But I've had nurses who have quit at like the 2 year and 10-month mark.
Hmm.
And so, because maybe they're getting a bonus, but they're leaving 33% of their vested, like that vesting, those funds, they're leaving it back at the old company. And because they've done it, because they've signed on the line and moved without, talking to me about it, things are being left on the table. So I've had that before, and those generally aren't fun conversations.
No, 2 months. Stick it out 2 more months.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned a 403b and a 401k. I don't think a lot of people know what those are, if there are any difference. But can you just briefly kind of talk about those two and what similarities, differences there are?
Yeah, there really aren't any. So all the 403b, 401k, they're just for different company types. So the 401k, think of that as like a private company. Generally, 403bs are going to be for individuals that are working, like you'll see a lot of teachers with that. So
Okay.
people that work for a school system, also people that work for nonprofits generally
Okay.
have 403bs.
Now let's get into travel nursing. I did some travel nursing during the pandemic, and when the money was rolling, like
Right.
travel
Yeah.
nurses were getting paid an
Paydays.
insane amount of money. Now I did not take the big time contracts, and there were some that were like $10,000 a week out in like California, working in a COVID unit kind of thing. But I still did pretty well. But I quickly learned that it's a nice check at the end of the week, but there's some stuff you didn't know about that. Tell us about some of the pitfalls that travel nurses make when they get that big check.
Right. So there's a couple of them. Number one is not setting aside funds for taxes. So essentially, when you are a travel nurse, you own a business essentially, and so not setting things up for retirement. I'm sorry, for your taxes, that can be one of the pitfalls. So that's a
Okay.
tough. One of the other things that I've seen is because you're not a W-2 employee, there isn't a retirement account set up. And so, with there not being a retirement account set up, a lot of kind of there's that out of sight, out of mind ideology, which is fine because generally that means that you have a ton in the bank, or like I said before, you're buying yourself some really. In your particular case, I think you'd probably rock a gold chain nicely, right? So one of those Flavor Flav
With a big
clocks,
RN
right?
on it.
Yes, I could see that for you. Um, so there's all those extra things, and they're not thinking about retirement. Generally, the travel nurses that I have talked to are not, they're not ready to leave the bedside. They're usually a little bit on the younger side, so they spend a little bit more
hmm
than a slightly tenured nurses. So those are kind of the biggest ones this is from a taxable standpoint and a retirement standpoint.
I had access to a 401k through the travel agency that I used, but
Okay.
like to be vested in that, I mean, you would have to stay with them for a while. And then another agency that recruited me, which I really liked, I think in terms of recruitment and personality, I think they had really good people, but you had to be with them for a full year before you were eligible for the 401k. And I
Yes.
think one of the things that I found interesting is after that 1 year, after a full year of travel nursing and getting like your taxable income, most of your money is made in your per diems, right? So like
Yep.
your housing and your food, and that's not taxable. And your hourly rate is typically pretty low. So I think for my year traveling, I made well over six figures, but my taxable income was only like 40,000. And so like if you look at your social security statements over the years, which I encourage everybody to go log in and look at your statements from time to time, it's like these big numbers, and then it got to that 1 year travel nursing, it was like 40,000. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
and I don't think people realize that.
You actually brought up a perfect point. One of the things that I've noticed is a lot of people don't know how to pull up their social security. So as we're doing planning, one of the things that we kind of factor into your retirement is social security. Finding your social security, that number is so easy. You go to ssa.gov, ssa.gov, and it says there's a little section that says project what your retirement is going to be, something like that. You just click on the button, you put in some information, and it'll tell you just based on the amount that you make,
Mhm.
the amount that you should have there. And then there are calculators as well. So
Right.
very, very simple, and it'll give you a good idea of what your retirement plan should look like.
And it'll even tell you like if you choose to retire early
Yes.
versus the average age versus extending it out. So, and that's an individual decision everybody has to make when they get to that point. And hopefully for people of my generation, hopefully that'll still be around when it comes time for me to retire in 14 years. So, um,
Listen, yeah.
now, you talked about your experience with your family and your kids being in the hospital and the nurses being there at the bedside. And we do spend more time at the bedside than any other healthcare provider. It's just the nature of what we do. And again, that's not to take away from the doctors. They are seeing other patients and they have a lot of other stuff that they have to take care of. But do you find that nurses maybe prioritize, because we get into this for, I think, the right reasons. Like we do this because it's a passion. We want to care for other people. But do you think sometimes that maybe nurses focus too much on prioritizing other people's care and ignore not only their own care, but also their own financial stability?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. So actually in two areas, I'm surprised at how I've seen a few nurses that their health isn't the best, which is surprising to me. But on a financial level, I don't know that much about healthcare. So I don't know that it would make much sense that you guys would know necessarily about a lot about what I do. I'm surprised at the level of information that you guys have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And especially considering, you guys go through college and everything. So the thought would be, hey, somebody's reaching out to you to kind of walk you through some of the basics. And so I'm actually in the process right now of working with nursing
Mm-hmm.
school in North Carolina to start working with their graduates, their brand new graduates. And so
Like a financial literacy type thing?
correct, right. So upon
That is
graduation,
brilliant.
yeah, I'm working on it. I have a meeting with the dean in the next couple of weeks, so that'll be fun.
That's exciting. I wish they would have. I mean, one, I think financial literacy should be for every graduate of high school and college, but I love that you're focusing in on nurses because I think you're right. Like that is a huge gap that we are missing.
It's been great. It's been very fulfilling.
When nurses come to you and they say, Ricky, the nurse financial guy, I want to retire early. Where do you start with them?
It's discipline. That is 100% a discipline thing. So there's a number that we aspire to. One of the very first questions I ask, and this is just with generally when I'm working with a client and specifically with individuals like that. So they're part of the FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early. And sometimes they haven't even heard of that, but they understand it as soon as I say it. They're like, oh yeah, that's me. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I ask what the freedom number is. And the freedom number is the number that's the amount that needs to come in every single month, come hell or high water. I have to have this amount come in order for us to be comfortable. So that for some people that's 6,000, some people it's 10, some people it's 15 or 20. Whatever that looks like, we have to figure out what that number is in order to backtrack. So okay, this is the number, this is the amount that you need. Okay, great. What is it going to take in order to get to that number? So what I mean is between your 401k, your 403b, your pension, between what you have outside. So if you own rental property, because you guys have an obsession with owning property, which is cool, you know, between your rental property, if you are married, between all of the different sources, how can we get you to that number and how quickly can we get you to that number? So that's fun and it's very achievable. I'm actually working with a nurse now. She's 46. She's like, Ricky, I want to retire by 60. Great, fantastic. And she wants to make $80,000 in retirement. And I ran her numbers, and at her current trajectory, she's going to be making about 120 a month in retirement.
Oh, I bet that
She's
made her
doing
happy.
right. Well, she doesn't even know yet. So hopefully she's not listening to this. I just ran her numbers. I just ran her numbers the 2 days ago. So we just had our meeting. I ran her numbers and I was like, okay, this is gonna be great. Like she's gonna love this. So, but it's because I put all of the different things together. I went on SSA.gov. I pulled her numbers from there. Used the calculator. I pulled like the information I know about her, what her return on investment is for her 403b. Like I put all of the things together, and this is where we're moving to. So yeah, it's exciting. It's very exciting when a plan comes together.
All right. So two things. One, if I may make a recommendation, I think you should defer telling her and just tell her to watch the podcast for the reveal. I'm kidding. So, hey, look, so that was one example, right? You ran the numbers for one person, but let's take a step back and look at a more broad picture. And what does a realistic early retirement timeline look like for the average bedside nurse?
The easy answer would be 65
Okay.
to 67. That's the easy answer. And that's because if you haven't started planning at least by your 40s, like when you hit your 40s, you can usually recover because that's still about a 25 years. Full Social Security starts at 67 for the majority of the people that are going to be watching this podcast. And then in addition to that, at the age of 59 and a half, you have access to either your 403b or your 401k without any sort of penalties. And so we really build something within that amount of time. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to pay off your home, get rid of your debt, paid off your student debt. So there's a lot of things that can kind of all culminate within that third act. So 65 to 67 is usually pretty safe. And then if they're very aggressive, we can move it up to 60, but that's usually the person that doesn't have any kids, or they're like, I'm a super aggressive. So they're getting 55% in the market over the last couple of years. So it really just depends, but that would be a safe answer.
So you talked about like that 40 and over nurse. Now I want to talk about catch-up contributions, and that starts when you hit 50. And I hit 50 early this year. My wife was actually very excited. I wasn't that excited to turn 50. I'm glad I'm still here, but 50 is a big number. And she said, but now we can do catch-up contributions. I'm familiar with what that means. Can you explain to those that are over the age of 50 that may be listening what that could mean for them?
So catch-up contributions basically means that you can we'll call it supercharge your retirement. So if you're contributing to an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, so whether that's a Roth or traditional funds, you can put an additional $1,000 a month into that bucket. So right now, the annual amount that you're able to contribute to the traditional and to the Roth is $7,000 for individuals that are under the age of 50. Once you hit 50, then you're able to put in an additional $1,000, so you can go up to 8,000. In
Mhm.
addition to that, you can actually start contributing up more into your 401k. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the number that for that is an additional like $7,000. So
Sounds
you
about
can
right.
start putting in an additional $7,000 into your 401k. So going from $23,500, that's the amount that you can max out
Mhm.
into 401k or 403b, and now it's up to $30,000. And then because of Secure Act 2.0, they actually added an additional catch up. Did you know about this?
I did not know about this,
Okay,
but
yeah. So
I bet my wife does.
yeah, right. So when at the beginning of this year, Secure Act 2.0 rolled out, and so it was approved, and so individuals between the age of 60 and 63, I want to say, are able to put an additional, I think it's $3,000 into their 401k.
Now, that sounds great, but people are going to immediately come back with, where is that money coming from? And I think that goes back to your point about discipline.
Discipline. Discipline is the name of the game. Yeah. There's there's a saying, he who fails to plan plans to fail. So
Right.
if
Okay.
you don't have a plan in place, you're not going to be able to do those things. And it all starts back. This is like the perfect circular because it all very much starts with the budget. You'd be surprised how many nurses I have an opportunity to speak with. And at the end, one of the big things is eating out. That's like
Hmm.
the majority of the time. And so they're like, "Oh, I probably spend like 100 or 2 a month." And like, "Okay, cool." So what we do is we take the last 3 months, and if we're really aggressive, I like to sit down with them and take the last 6 months of bank statements, and we take a highlighter because 'cause I'm old school, and we take a highlighter if they're in person, and we go through and we highlight all of the door dashes, and
Wow.
every single one, and we get an average. Usually between $500 and $600 is the norm per
Per
month.
month?
Per month, right?
Oh my gosh.
Which just sounds obscene, but you'd be surprised when you start at totaling everything up. Yeah,
Wow.
the Starbucks, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and then whatever other
Right.
eating out that they do. Yeah, it adds up really
Wow.
fast.
Quick break from the conversation. If you're enjoying Beyond the Call Light, please don't forget to follow the show wherever you listen. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss a new episode. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, a quick rating or review really helps others find the show. Speaking of which, let's get back to it.
Talk about the Roth IRA versus traditional IRA real quick and what the difference is.
You asked me earlier what are some of the things that nurses don't understand, and this is actually one of the other big ones. I said taxes, but I didn't really drill in.
Mhm.
So it's the way that your 401k is taxed or 403b is taxed. So let's just say, and I'll just I'm going to use this example that I have right here.
Okay.
If an individual has 150,000, makes $150,000 this year for 2025,
Okay.
let's just say they contribute $20,000 into their traditional 401k. So what traditional means is that it hasn't been taxed by Uncle Sam this year. Okay.
Okay.
So as far as Uncle Sam is concerned, you've stuck that under a bridge somewhere. It doesn't
Okay.
exist for right now.
Okay.
What that means is that for this year, instead of you making $150,000,
Uh-huh.
your gross income will be $130,000.
Okay. So it reduces your taxable income.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
It
All
reduces
right.
your taxable income. Okay. So what that means, let's say that $20,000 just sits there and you don't contribute another dollar ever, and it
Hmm.
grows for 20 years. Now all of a sudden that $20,000 is $110,000.
Okay.
When you go to withdraw it, when you withdraw those funds, every single cent of it is taxable.
All 120,000 or whatever it's grown to. Okay. All right. And then, so that's a traditional. What's a Roth?
So the Roth is you pay taxes on the seed, meaning you would pay taxes on the $20,000. And same example when it grows to 110,000, which is insane. 110,000, then all of a sudden you don't have to pay taxes at all.
Because it was taxed when you first invested it out of that paycheck.
That's correct.
Now, so if you say, go back to that example, you're making 150, you do 20,000 into a Roth IRA, you're still taxed at 150,000. Like that's still your taxable income. And that's the difference between the two.
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Excellent. Again, we talk about discipline, and that leads into the next question. So how do you help clients strike that balance between saving aggressively and being disciplined, but still being able to enjoy life while they're young and can do all the things?
What I like to employ is called the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of there's two different ones. I use the 70-20-10 rule or the 50-40-10 rule. And so I'll explain them. So the 70%, depending on, how much you need to spend. So 70% would be for all of the things, all of your needs. So think about things like your insurance, your mortgage, your car, all of those different things. All of those would be held by the 70%. Okay. So if you
Okay.
make $100,000 per year, 70% of that goes towards that section. 20% goes into your investing or your saving.
Okay.
And then 10% is to your giving. If you believe in charitable giving, tithing, giving to an organization, whatever that looks like for you,
Okay.
that's great. There's actually science that backs giving. So for every dollar that you give to an organization, I think it's 100, like $1.20 gets returned to you within, I think it's within 24 months. It's just it's like one of the laws of the universe. I didn't make it. It's just the way that it works. That's one of them. Let's just say that you don't need the full 70%. Then that's when we shifted to the 50-40-10 rule. So 50% goes to your needs, 40% goes to the investing and the saving, and then 10% goes into the other part. The
Okay.
reason I'm bringing all that up is because within the saving, within the needs portion, what I would suggest is taking 1% of that, and just have like a fund budget, a bank account that's strictly for budgeting. And if you're a married couple, I would suggest each person have their own where you're not accountable to anyone.
Okay.
1% doesn't sound like a lot, but it will keep things orderly. And that way you're actually able to do fun things while also enjoying life. If you want to bump it up as well, that's fine. But usually, and I said 1%, usually we put away about 5%. Usually that's where I try to move that.
We kind of touched on this earlier, but I was hoping maybe you could kind of summarize it. And that is, how can nurses use employer retirement plans like 401ks, TSPs, like I have a TSP, and 403bs more effectively? Like we talked about, don't leave money on the table, but what else can they do?
So one of the things that I've seen is actually paying attention to the way that it's invested. And that dovetails a little bit into HSAs. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think that it's very important to understand what you're investing in. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. So generally, when you start a position, they ask you a couple of questions, and then they put you into what's called a target date fund. So what a target date funds is, it decides what year, just based on your age and when you're planning on retiring, what age you're planning on retiring, and then it locks you into this investment portfolio that it shifts along with your.
Well, interesting. Okay.
Right. So that's what I would say probably about 75% of the nurses that I'm working with, the majority of them have a target date fund, and I'll explain it if you're good with that.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Okay. So let's just say that an individual is planning on retiring in the year 2025. That's actually perfect.
Okay.
That individual, the majority of their target date funds are going to be extremely conservative, either in bonds or in money market accounts, because the way that those funds work is that it grows to a certain point, and every year it shifts. It removes more of the equity, meaning like the stocks, and it shifts it over into more conservative because theoretically, as we get closer to retirement, we're attempting to conserve a lot more of our money. And so that's the way it moves. However, let's just say that an individual started late. So they're like, I really got to catch up. And they're
Now, what you're
actually
like, say, give me an example of what would age would be considered late. Like, what are you thinking?
like 50, like
Okay.
usually like 50, 55, like right around there. And they're like, oh, and unfortunately, usually this happens in when I'm talking to somebody that's gone through a divorce, their retirement account has been drained, and
Yeah.
so for one reason or another, or they've had like some sort of massive, financial issue, and
Mhm.
so what ends up happening is we need to catch up, like we need to kind of get at this aggressively.
Right. Okay.
The default is that target date fund.
Okay.
And so if you fall within that age range, or once you hit that age, almost everything is conservative. But you need a 9 to 10% return on your investment. But it's only going to give you like a 5 or 6% because it's in a target date fund.
Right.
So that's like a big one. And I'm looking
Mhm.
through, okay, this is probably not in your best interest. You don't want a money market account. You don't want a bond fund. That's not going to help you grow. And so
Right.
that's oftentimes that's like almost the top thing that I would suggest looking at it and having someone get a set of eyes on it to make sure it's going to grow according to
Right.
what your life looks like.
Right. It needs something a little bit more aggressive. Maybe a fund that has a bit more risk to it, but has a higher rate of return typically.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And that's typically something that, like you kind of talked about, like when you're younger, you can be a little more aggressive because you have time to recover. But as we get older, like you said, we want to retire. We don't want to lose the money we have. So if you get too aggressive and you gamble and you lose, then it's going to be it's going to be very difficult to make that back up. So what is your definition of financial freedom for nurses?
When the amount that you're able to generate from what you've built
Mhm.
outpaces what you are bringing in from the hospital or from your W-2. So what that may look like is we'll go back to what I was saying earlier about what that freedom number is. So let's say that freedom number is $8,000 per month, like that nurse I was speaking of earlier. We need to figure out what that big pot looks like in order to be able to pull off. Or it could be dividend dividend stocks, or there are financial vehicles that can actually generate a pension like rate of return for you. So
Okay.
there are options.
All right. Uh, Side hustles. Let's talk about that. I feel like everybody's got some kind of side hustle. I have friends on here who do like t-shirts and pins and buttons, and they're doing all these side hustle things. How does those income streams play into like maybe accelerating those retirement goals?
So I can kind of go at this from two different ways. Sometimes the plan is to have the side hustle becomes the main hustle.
Right.
So how many times have I seen nurses on here who are just like, I used to be a nurse, now I'm a full-time TikToker. So the side hustle became, the main hustle. And so that's one way. I mean, that's like kind of one of the ways. But one of
Right.
the, if the plan is the side hustle will remain the side hustle, is if you set it up, depending on if you're contributing to your company's 401k, you can actually set up an investment account that's specifically for that business. So
Okay.
their company, I think the posts I made yesterday are about SEPs, SEP, so
Okay.
simplified employment pensions.
Okay.
Um, and simplified employee pensions. And so they're kind of like 401ks, except only the company contributes to it. There's also solo 401ks. So there are other options if you aren't contributing to your company's 401k.
Today I learned that there is a self-employment pension. I did not know that was an option. So, but I think you're right. Like I know there's one nurse, Rogue Nurse Creations, used to be a bedside nurse, and now her full-time gig is just making nurse related products like badge reels and badge buddies and shirts and sweatshirts. And like she's invested tens of thousands of dollars into her shop. And it's really cool to see them take that passion. She used to just do it for free and just like make little crafts. And now she's like, oh, I can turn the side hustle into a full-time gig. But I hope that she has a good financial planner that is helping her along this journey, because I bet it changed a lot of things.
When a nurse starts a side hustle, generally speaking, that first couple of years of starting a business, they're not profitable. You're pouring more into growing the business than anything else. And those are perfect years if you can swing it to max out your Roth account, because going back to the Roth, there are a lot of rules. Well, there's a couple of rules around Roths, but one of them is that your AGI, which is your adjusted gross income, can't exceed $150,000 a year.
Okay.
So like, let's just say that and this is going to kind of dip into your wife's territory as a CPA a little bit, but let's just say that you have a year where you're pouring just a lot of money from this business that you're trying to grow into your personal. You're taking your personal money, throwing it into the business. It's actually lowering your taxes. And I'm not going to get into that. That's not my
Understood.
That's not what I do. But what I can tell you is that there's an opportunity there to lower your adjusted gross income if you're first starting a business and it's not profitable, or you're investing a lot of your own personal funds. There's a great opportunity there to actually put money in your Roth if it's lowering the amount that you've made for that year. So talk to a CPA and a financial advisor. I don't want to give any advice right now, but that's when I see losses, I'm like, this is perfect. We're going to max out that Roth. It's a great year for that.
I know all about losses. I'm building this podcast. Like my wife and I talked, and she's on board with it. And that's the great thing is she understands, like, when you first start doing this, you're going to operate at a loss, right? You're going to put more into it than you get out. But the old saying goes, to make money, you have to spend money. And so you have to invest in things. So yes, I'm glad I have somebody on board that understands that and is okay with some losses here in the beginning. So, but I'm looking forward to. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's going to be great. I'm so grateful that you came on, but we're not done yet. I have several more questions, and then I will let you go. I am at a place in my life where I have worked for a long time, and I am at a place where I make enough money that I can do a catch-up contribution. But not everybody can do that. So what are some small changes, like financial habits, nurses can do to set them on that path to maybe get to that point?
But one of the things that I have found is that nurses don't realize how many jobs are out there in obscure places. Like, it doesn't always have to be a hospital. And I know this is not exactly what you were looking for,
It's
but
okay.
there are opportunities to work for the government, which is, you're going to have a pension and all those other things. So working for the VA, one of the other things is working for insurance companies. That's a big one. And so figuring out ways, either to get a higher paying job, or to start that side gig. But
Right.
that's going to take on, that's requiring extra work on your part. I think it all really goes back to the one thing that I talked about, which is discipline. So
Okay.
if you're able to work like an extra overtime shift or two, depending on what that looks like, let's just say that there's one overtime shift that gives you $500, an extra $500 a month. If
Okay.
you are able to put that away, if you are able to commit to doing that one shift a month and putting that away in a brokerage account or Roth account or a traditional account, whatever that looks like, that's $6,000 over the course of a year.
Right.
I know, so one shift isn't crazy, but you tell me, like, I mean, I've never worked an overtime shift as a nurse. Like, what does that generally look like for you as a nurse, and one overtime shift?
You mean like financially?
Right. Is $500 possible?
Well, it depends. Oh yeah, absolutely. It depends on what your base hourly rate is. So the longer you've been there, like my hourly rate is going to be higher than, like, say, a new nurse grad. So my overtime, I'm going to get paid a lot more than that nurse will, because she's new or he's new and is making a lower hourly rate. So yes, one overtime shift for me. I think I'm trying to think, doing the math in my head here, 12 hours. Yeah. So, I mean, we're looking at, like, for me, anywhere from $700 to $800 for one 12-hour overtime shift.
Right. Okay. So for easy math's sake, one shift a month, and if you're investing that and getting about a 9% rate of return over 20 years, that's about $335,000. That's one shift a month, which that's not terrible.
No, that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's just that that small shift. If you can invest one extra hour of or one overtime shift,
Mm-hmm.
massive difference for your future. Massive.
Now, we was talking about, like, a new nurse that's coming into the profession. So for those new nurses that are just coming in, what is one thing they should do immediately to set themselves up for financial success?
Figure out your budget. Definitely figure out your budget. Um, I there are I mentioned the the HSA. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that, and I'll touch on that in just a second. But
Okay.
when you have an opportunity to get your HR packet, you get the HR packet when you've just started that first job.
Mm-hmm.
Read the HR packet. Please read the HR packet, because inside of the HR packet there are gold nuggets. So things like I've mentioned before, which are making sure that we know what your vesting schedule is, know what the company matches, because sometimes it's staggered. Like they'll give
Mm-hmm.
you 100% on the first 3%, and then it's tiered after that. But also
Okay.
understanding your disability insurance. That's a big one, really big one.
Okay.
Because most disability policies only give 50 to 60% of your
Right.
base salary
Mm-hmm.
And if you work a lot of overtime as a brand new nurse, which most brand new nurses do because they're like ready to get it, that's not even accounting for that. So understand what that looks like. I would strongly suggest getting a disability insurance, because disability insurance is going to replace your paycheck.
Like
Um,
supplemental in addition to whatever they cover.
that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, because it doesn't account for any bonuses or any overtime.
Okay.
And so that's a big one, because you have to be on your feet. It's not like a job like a software engineer where you can just kind of just sit behind a desk for the most part. If you're bedside, please get disability insurance, please.
Okay.
Um, so read your HR handbook. Please get it disability insurance. Max out your HSA. That's a big one, and I can explain HSA. And
I was
then
gonna say,
make sure
can
that
you explain that for new nurses who may not know what an HSA
Oh yeah,
is?
yeah. So an HSA stands for a health savings account. Health savings accounts are absolutely amazing. So with a health savings account, you put money into an account, and it's usually, well, it's through your employer, and that money you can either choose for it to be, I think the majority of them now are able to be invested, or it doesn't have to be invested. But the amount that you put in is tax free. And then when you go to withdraw it, as long as it's used for health purposes, it's
Mm-hmm.
also tax free. So
Okay.
personally, I've gotten LASIK, and I paid with that with my HSA card, and I ruptured my Achilles tendon a few years ago,
No.
and all of that went on the card as well, because I don't really use it for anything else other than, the occasional optometrist appointment.
Okay.
So it's huge, and it rolls over from year to year. That's the huge part. The
And that's different from
FSA,
an FSA, and that's where, yeah,
yes,
you're
yes,
going there exactly. Okay.
yes. The FSA, it expires at the end of the year. So let's just say you dropped $5,000 into the FSA. If you don't use it, you lose it. The HSA compounds year over year during the course of your entire career. And so part of our retirement planning is making sure that we're aware of, like, where's that HSA? Is it being invested? Because eventually when you go to retire, we're going to use those funds for health purposes.
Well,
That's
and as we get
that's
older,
right.
there's a lot of health issues that we all have to deal with.
Right.
Most of us. That's excellent. Great. Now let's talk about financial myths or bad advice that you have seen being given out on social media. And what would you say to that? And how can we warn nurses?
So one of the things I hear, and if you are on TikTok for any length of time and you stumble across by IULs, I'm not saying that IULs are bad, but what I am saying is that it's very much they should be tailored to the individual.
No,
So,
you said IUL. What's an IUL?
oh, yeah, yeah. IUL stands for an Indexed Universal Life Policy. And
Okay.
so it's a life insurance policy that is i- it's it has a cash benefit in it, but
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes the way that it's sold or the way that it's presented is
Mm-hmm.
as a replacement for your 401k or your 403b, when it is
Mm.
not that at all. So
Okay.
I often, especially younger nurses,
Mm-hmm.
I run across and they're like, okay, so what about this IUL thing? I heard that I should get one of those. That's not always the case at all. So that's number one.
Okay.
But
No. Go ahead.
the second one is that the second one is this idea of throw all of your money into Roth. I'm not saying that Roth is bad, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like we really have to do a plan to say, okay, well, if we're projecting what's going to happen with your taxes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is it a good decision for you to get taxed now, taxed later? I'm not saying Roth is a terrible idea. What I am
Mm-hmm.
saying is that Roth can be good and it can hurt you because in retirement you do actually want to have some shown income
Mm-hmm.
later down the line. So there's those are two of the most common myths I've seen branding nurses.
Now, how can listeners to this podcast get in touch with you if they want to talk to you more about their financial planning?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm on TikTok, the nurses financial guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would probably be the best way. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Um, but if you see me on TikTok, it's the nurses financial guy, and I just have a lot of I try to throw out as much education, things that I'm running across, and a lot of times real time, without disclosing any information, no personal identifiable information. But
Sure.
I do say, okay, well, I'm running across this right now. Here's how it pertains. Some of the questions I run across, or if I'm hearing a common theme. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the nurse's financial guy would be the easiest way.
Some outstanding. And lastly, what does retiring early and living fully mean to you personally?
So I don't know that I'll retire early. I genuinely love what I do. And also, as I mentioned, the six kids, the goal for me, the broader goal for me is eventually to bring my children when they come of age into my practice and to kind of take a step back and be more of a be more on the consultative side of things and allow them to run things. So that's the living fully. I don't think I could live any other way at this point in my life. It is always full, but retiring early, I would be bored, I think, perhaps. But for me, I would say living life to the max. So doing well for others, doing well for myself and my family, and treating people better than they treat themselves, honestly.
All right. And I do have one final question that I ask every guest that comes on to the podcast. And that is, if you had to stop what you are doing today and completely change careers and do something completely different, what would that be?
So it used to be a teacher, which is ironic because I feel like I'm still doing a lot of teaching.
You are.
Yes, I enjoy it. It would easily be public speaking if I could be compensated for public speaking or like a motivational speaker. That would just light me up. I genuinely enjoy inspiring others and seeing like that Yahoo, I can do it. That's that's great for me. It fills my bucket as much, hopefully, as it fills theirs.
Well, that's awesome. Ricky, the nurse's financial guy, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to share your knowledge with the nurses who follow this podcast, anybody else who is looking to improve their financial standing and be able to retire at a decent age. Thank you again so very much. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Gary.
My name's Gary. I'm the ER nurse, and you've been listening to Beyond the Call Light.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Call Light with Gary Cope. Don't forget to clock out.